The funeral was a joke, really. Tiny, sad little thing. Just me, the priest, and these 3 suits standing stiffly at the back of the chapel. They didn't even bother signing the guest book. Dad would have gotten a kick out of that. He always said bureaucrats couldn't hide their officialness if their lives depended on it. I was shoving the last sympathy card into my already overflowing bag when one of the suits, a tall guy with eyes that seemed to take in everything, approached me. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "I'm Dr. Albright. I worked with your father." He handed me a business card. No fancy logo, no title, just a phone number. "When you're ready to discuss his position," he continued, "call this number." Position? What position? Dad was just a researcher. I called the number the next morning. Not because I was ready, but because I was broke. Dad's sudden illness had wiped out his savings faster than anyone could have imagined, and my grad school loans weren't going to magically pay themselves. The facility they told me to go to was straight out of a spy movie. Huge gates, mean-looking guards, walls that screamed, KEPOUT. It was just another government research complex, plunked down in the middle of nowhere. Dr. Albright met me in a conference room that was totally windowless and smelled like stale coffee mixed with bleach. He slid a stack of papers across the table. "Your father specifically requested you as his replacement," he said, pushing a pen toward me. "The position comes with immediate debt forgiveness and a significant salary." My jaw almost hit the floor. Debt forgiveness. Significant salary. What exactly did my father do here? I asked, trying to sound casual, like this kind of thing happened every day. "He worked in containment research," Dr. Albright replied, his face giving nothing away. "You'll need to sign these before we can discuss specifics." These turned out to be non-disclosure agreements or NDAs. It took me an hour to read through the legalese. Words like classified, confidential, termination practically leaped off every page. I signed them all. What choice did I have? "Welcome to the SCP Foundation, Sarah," Dr. Albright said, a hint of a smile finally touching his lips. "We contain and study anomalous objects. Your father was one of our most dedicated researchers. And that, my friends, was how I, Sarah Mitchell, art history grad student, ended up working for a secret organization that dealt with things that went bump in the night. Or, as I was about to learn, things that went a whole lot worse than just bump. My dad, dedicated. That was putting it mild. Little did I know, dedicated to his job was the reason I was here. Training started the next day. It was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool filled with things you couldn't even name. Dr. Albright started with the basics of containment classifications. First, there were the safe objects. Basically, these were things you could lock in a box and forget about. Easy peasy, right? Then came Euclid. These objects needed to be watched, monitored like a hawk. You couldn't take your eyes off them. And finally, there was Keter. Oh boy, Keter. These were the bad boys, the ones that actively tried to escape, to break free, the ones that made you question your sanity for even being in the same building. After each lesson, there were tests. Identifying containment scenarios, choosing the right protocols, learning emergency procedures. It was a whirlwind of information. "You've got good instincts," Dr. Albright said after I asked one of the tests, correctly classifying 20 scenarios in a row. Like your father, he could spot a containment risk from a mile away. That made me feel a bit better, a bit more connected to Dad, even though I still had no clue what had really happened to him. The physical training was insane. They taught us how to use hazmat suits rated for all sorts of nasty threats, how to operate these clunky remote-controlled arms, the proper way to handle and I quote, containment breach. And let me tell you, every procedure had to be perfect. Every protocol followed to the letter. Screw up, and you could end up in a body bag or expose some horror that would lead to others ending up in one. Then, in my third week, they introduced us to D-class personnel. This was where things got seriously messed up. They showed us intake procedures, testing protocols, and the soul-crushing monthly termination reports. These people are expendable, the instructor droned, like he was reading a grocery list. Their lives mean less than maintaining containment. Some of my classmates looked like they were going to be sick. Me, I just nodded and took notes. I had to focus, had to learn, had to survive for myself and to find out the truth about what happened to my dad and the psych evils. Those were daily. They measured how we handled stress, how well we followed orders, our willingness to make hard decisions. We were shown footage of containment breaches, each one more disturbing than the last, and then asked to explain what went wrong. Your father scored perfectly on these evaluations. Dudder, Albright mentioned while reviewing my results. You're remarkably similar. I tried to take it as a compliment. Week 4 was when things got real. Hands-on exercises with safe class objects. We practiced basic containment procedures on a metal cube that was always room temperature, no matter what, a pencil that wrote in colors I'd never seen before, and a book that read itself out loud. But only in Latin. These are the easy ones, our instructor said, a grim look on his face. The ones that can't really hurt you? Week 5. Euclid. We were paired with senior researchers to observe active containment procedures. I watched them feed a plant that only ate human fingers, Yikes, helped monitor a mirror that showed everyone's death, a double Lycus, and documented a phone that called people 5 minutes before they died, a triple Lycus. You're handling this well. Hayes, a senior researcher with tired eyes, said after I helped her log readings from a sentient virus colony. Most new recruits struggle more with the reality of what we do. Then came the big one at my specific assignment briefing. Albright sat across from me, a single red folder on his desk. You'll be monitoring SCP-254, he said, sliding the folder across. There's only one rule you need to remember. Inside the folder was a single typed line, never act directly with SCP-254. That's it. I asked, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. Just don't interact with it directly, he said, his voice deadly serious. That's all you need to know. He closed the folder. You start tonight. The containment chamber for SCP-254 was smaller than I expected. Climate-controlled reinforced walls, an observation window. And in the center, a sealed case sitting on a digital scale that was wired to a bunch of alarms. Security cameras covered every angle. It felt like overkill for a mug. Dr. Hayes walked me through the monitoring station. Wait readings every 15 minutes, she instructed, pointing to a screen displaying a bunch of numbers. Full visual inspection every hour. Any change in form must be documented immediately. Form changes? I asked, confused. She brought up an image on the monitor. A plain white coffee mug with blue stripes. This is its current form, she explained. Sometimes it's a coffee mug, sometimes a water bottle. Once it was a novelty shot glass for 3 days. Seems harmless enough, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Hayes turned to me sharply. 2 months ago, we lost 3 researchers because someone thought the same thing. This isn't just a coffee mug, Sarah. It's something that kills people in ways you haven't seen yet. She pulled up a video file. All new monitors watch this, she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. The footage showed a testing chamber. AD class subject, a guy who looked utterly terrified, approached what looked like a plastic water bottle. The timestamp showed this was from 6 weeks ago. Standard test procedure. Hayes narrated. Remote manipulation failed. We needed direct human contact data. The subject picked up the bottle. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then his hand seized around it. The audio was muted, but I could see him screaming. He tried to drop it, to shake it off, to pull his hand away. Nothing worked. Molecular bonding? Hayes explained, her voice chillingly calm. Instantaneous and permanent. The bottle began to fill with something dark. The subject's face contorted as the liquid rose. When it reached the top, he tried to pour it out. It just refilled immediately. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Blood and bile, mostly," Hayes replied, like she was discussing the weather. She fast-forwarded the footage. The subject grew increasingly gaunt. His skin pulled tight against his bones. He lasted 62 hours. "That's longer than most," she commented. I watched, horrified, as he alternated between drinking the full liquid and trying to resist. His body withered with each passing hour. The time stamp showed his time of death, 62 hours, 17 minutes after initial contact. "The only way to survive is to keep drinking," Hayes said. "But eventually they all stop. Either from exhaustion or..." She gestured at the screen. "This is why we have the rule." My first solo shift started at midnight. The monitoring station hummed with the quiet sounds of electronics. Every 15 minutes, I logged the weight reading 240.5 grams. Every hour, I documented the visual inspection. White coffee mug, blue stripes, no changes. Then, at 3:15 a.m., it happened. One moment it was the coffee mug, the next it was an aluminum Coke can. The change happened between blinks. I followed procedure, documented the change, time-stamped the footage, and filed the report. The morning crew arrived at 8:00 a.m. I logged my final readings and headed for mandatory decontamination. As I passed the observation window, I noticed something on the monitoring station screen I hadn't seen before. A personnel file. My father's. Status deceased. Cause of containment breach SCP-254. Last words tell Sarah about the job. My blood ran cold. Now I knew why there was only one rule, and why he wanted me here. To learn it, I stared at my father's file until the screen went dark, the words burned into my vision. "Find something interesting," Dr. Hayes asked from the doorway. I jumped, startled. "I was just looking for answers," I stammered. "Everyone does," she said, walking to the monitoring station and pulling up a different file. "But first, you need to learn how to prevent history from repeating itself." The next screen showed technical diagrams of the containment chamber. Schematics, specifications, engineering tolerances. "Your father designed most of these systems," Hayes said, "after we lost the Beta 7 research team. Everything here exists for a reason." She pointed to the robotic manipulation arms. "These need calibration every 4 hours. Even a millimeter of drift could mean death." Her finger moved to the weight sensors. "These are accurate to 1/10 of a gram. Any variance means containment is compromised." Then, the atmospheric controls. "This room is a closed system. Nothing in or out without authorization." "How did he die?" I asked, the question finally escaping my lips. Hayes closed the files. "First, you learn how to stay alive," she said. "Then you get answers." She gestured to the control panel. "Show me the calibration sequence." The next 12 hours were a blur of technical training. How to verify sensor alignment, how to test seal integrity, how to manage atmospheric pressure, how to spot the early warning signs of equipment failure. Every procedure had backup procedures. Every system had redundancies. "Again," Hayes said, after I completed the calibration sequence. "Faster this time." I ran through it again and again and again. My fingers flew across the controls until the procedures became reflexes, muscle memory. Good, she finally said. Tomorrow we start on containment breach protocols. That night, I pored over the technical documents, trying to cram every detail into my brain. I learned about molecular bonding rates, fluid generation patterns, survival statistics. The numbers told their own horror story. Average time to death after bonding 47 hours. Longest survival time 70 hours. Shortest 22 hours. Total confirmed casualties since containment 27. The next morning brought a new kind of training. Dr. Paddle, the environmental systems specialist, a guy who looked like he hadn't slept in days, walked me through containment breach scenarios. If the weight changes, hit this button, he said, pointing to a red switch that looked way too important to be touched. If the pressure drops, this one. If the temperature fluctuates more than 2 degrees, these 3 in sequence. He looked at me, his eyes serious. Hesitate, and people die. We ran simulations. Weight variances, pressure drops, temperature spikes. Some were just tests, pulled from a database of possibilities. Others were pulled from actual incidents, each one a stark reminder of what could go wrong. I learned to recognize the patterns, to spot the warning signs. Your father wrote most of these scenarios, Paddle mentioned during a break. Said the best way to survive was to understand how others died. Ironic, given his fate. I pushed the thought away and went back to the simulations. The afternoon was all about the remote handling system. Those robotic arms were our only, safe, way to interact with SCP-524. 2 primary units, with interchangeable attachments. Both could be replaced without entering the chamber. Both had independent power supplies. Both could be destroyed remotely if contaminated. These arms cost more than you'll make in 10 years, Hayes said, while teaching me the maintenance sequence. But losing them is better than losing people. I practiced with the controls, learning to manipulate test objects with pinpoint precision. How to measure, how to move, how to maintain sterile conditions. Your movements are too cautious, Hayes observed. Hesitation gets people killed here. I thought careful was good, I said, confused. Careful is good, fear is not, she corrected, adjusting my hand position on the controls. Respect the danger, don't fear it. Fear makes mistakes. Week 2 brought my first observation of active testing. A D-class subject was scheduled for direct contact assessment. I watched from the monitoring station as they briefed him. Subject D. Lenson 1424, Hayes noted, a former medical student, thinks this is a drug trial. The poor guy. The test chamber cameras showed everything. The subject approaching the container, now in the form of a plastic water bottle. The moment of contact. The bonding. The screaming. Watch the readings, Hayes instructed, as the subject's hands fused to the bottle. Weight stays constant, even as the liquid generates. Pressure remains stable, despite his movements. Temperature holds steady, regardless of his body heat. I logged every change, every measurement, every detail. The subject lasted 51 hours before cardiac arrest. Longer than average, but not long enough. Acceptable data collection, Hayes said afterward. But you missed 3 minor pressure fluctuations. They were within the normal range, I argued. Normal range isn't good enough, she snapped back. Normal range gets people killed. The next week was focused on form analysis. Hayes pulled up years of documentation. Hundreds of different containers, thousands of transformations. It learns, she explained. Adapts its appearance based on who's watching. Chooses forms that might tempt people to handle it. I studied the patterns. Business executives saw expensive whiskey bottles. Students saw energy drink cans. Medical staff saw pharmaceutical containers. What did my father see? I asked, unable to stop myself. Hayes paused. That's in his personal file, she said. You don't have clearance yet. But I was learning, growing, understanding the containment procedures that kept us alive, the protocols that prevented disasters, the systems my father had built to protect others from his fate. Then came my first real containment breach. It was during a night shift, a minor weight variance. 240.2 grams instead of 240.5. The kind of change that could be a sensor glitch. The kind of change that had killed people who assumed it was nothing. I hit the alarm without hesitation, initiated lockdown, called in the response team, followed every procedure exactly as I'd been trained. The breach team found a microscopic crack in the containment case. Barely measurable, but enough to kill everyone in the facility if it had gone unnoticed. Dr. Albright was waiting in his office the next morning. A new security badge sat on his desk. Level 2 clearance. Your father would be proud, he said, sliding the badge across. He wrote that test scenario himself. I picked up the badge, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Was everything a test here? I asked. Always, Dr. Albright replied, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. He opened a drawer and removed a familiar red folder. But now you're ready for the real work. Starting tonight, you begin active testing supervision. I left his office with new clearance, new responsibilities, and an old question still unanswered. But I understood more now. About the facility, about the protocols, about my father, and about the terrible, dangerous thing we were trying to contain. 2.0 Experimental Advanced Agent Gemini. All right, here we go. This is the final part fight tree, the last rule, D143032. Please approach SCP-254. My voice sounded strange, echoing through the testing chamber's intercom. Professional detached, like I wasn't sending someone to their doom. Hayes stood behind me, watching. This was it. My first time supervising a test. The D-class subject, a former chemistry professor with surprisingly steady hands, walked toward the containment case. Testing chamber atmospheric pressure stable. Patel reported from his station. Temperature nominal. Humidity controlled. Proceed with remote case opening, I instructed. The robotic arms activated, and I entered the precise commands into the case's control panel. The seals hissed as they released. Inside sat what looked like an expensive crystal whiskey tumbler, the kind you'd see in a CEO's office, the kind our subject probably used before his situation. ED 40332, please verbally acknowledge the testing parameters, I said, my voice echoing in the chamber. I am to pick up the glass container and hold it for no less than 5 seconds. He recited, his voice remarkably calm. I understand this test carries extreme risk and consent to proceed. I watched the monitors. Weight reading 240.5 grams. Pressure stable. Temperature unchanged. Everything normal. Except for what was about to happen. You may begin, I said. The subject reached for the glass. His hands were steady, no hesitation. The kind of confidence that got people killed here. Contact. 2 seconds passed. 3, 4. His scream came at exactly 4.7 seconds, right on schedule. Molecular bonding confirmed. I reported, checking the readings. Time to fusion, 4.7 seconds. Subject shows expected pain response. The glass began to fill with a clear liquid, thicker than water, slightly yellow. The initial fluid appears to be bile, Hayes noted. Common first response with academic subjects. D4332 tried to release the glass, but his hands remained fused. The liquid kept rising until it reached the rim. Standard procedure said to just observe, document everything, let it happen. Subject, I said into the intercom. You need to drink it. He looked at the observation window, his eyes wide with terror. What? Drink it or die faster? Your choice. Hayes nodded slightly. Proper protocol. No sugarcoating. The subject stared at the glass for 6.3 minutes before taking his first drink. I logged the delay. Most waited longer. Some never drank at all. Initial consumption at 6.3 minutes. I reported. Subject showing expected revulsion response. The liquid replenished immediately, clear again, then darker, red tinged. Fluid transitioning to blood content. Hayes observed. Proceeding as expected. Hour 1 passed, then 2. The subject alternated between drinking and dry heaving. His skin grew pale, his eyes sank. Standard dehydration symptoms, right on schedule. How long will he last? I asked Hayes quietly. Given his age and physical condition, 40 hours maximum. Probably less? She replied. I nodded and kept logging data. Weight remained constant, 240.5 grams. The liquid changed every few hours. Blood, bile, mucus, sometimes combinations, always replenishing. At hour 15 we got something new. Fluid composition changing, I reported, watching the monitors. Consistency thicker than previous samples. Common at this stage, Hayes said. The object adapts its output to maximize subject deterioration. The subject lasted 28 hours before cardiac arrest. Below average survival time, above average data quality. Acceptable supervision, Hayes said as we filed the final report, but you need to work on your subject instructions. More clarity, less emotion. I told him to drink it, I pointed out. You gave him a choice, she corrected. There are no choices here, only procedures. The next test came 3 days later. Different subject, different form, same results. Then another and another. I logged every detail, every measurement, every scream. The data built up, patterns emerged, but something felt wrong. The weight never changes, I said during a test review. No matter what liquid generates, no matter how much they drink, it's always 240.5 grams. That's how we know containment is secure, Hayes replied. But where does the liquid come from? Where does it go? Conservation of mass says. Stop! Hayes cut me off, closing the file. Questions like that got your father killed. I wanted to press further, but her expression stopped me. Some questions weren't meant to be asked. Some answers weren't meant to be found. Week 4 of testing brought something new. A subject lasted longer than expected. Much longer. 48 hours in, stable. I reported. Subject showing minimal deterioration despite continuous fluid generation. Hayes studied the monitors. Impossible. Check the readings again. I verified everything. Weight 240.5 grams. Pressure normal. Temperature steady. But the subject wasn't dying on schedule. Pull up the subject's file, Hayes ordered. D15888. Former medical researcher, specialized in blood disorders. Terminate the test, Hayes commanded suddenly. Terminate the subject immediately. What? Why? I asked, shocked. He's not just drinking it, she said, pointing to the subtle movements on camera. He's analyzing it, taking samples, learning things he shouldn't. I hit the termination button. The chamber filled with gas. The subject collapsed. Final survival time 49 hours 17 minutes. All data from this test is now classified, Hayes announced. Level 4 clearance only. Why? What was he finding? I asked. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a chilling certainty. Do you know why there's only one rule for SCP-254? She asked. Because every other rule we made, it learned to break. Every restriction, it adapted to circumvent. Every containment system, it eventually defeated. Except one. Never interact directly? Never interact directly, I confirmed, a cold dread creeping up my spine. Because the moment you do, she continued, Kit starts learning about you, and it never stops until you're dead. The words hit hard. I thought about my father's file, about his last words. How did he die? I finally asked. Really? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. He tried to understand it, she said softly. Thought if he could figure out where the liquid came from, how the bonding worked, he could find a way to save people. She looked at the containment chamber. He found something. Something that scared him enough to break containment protocols. Something that made him. The alarm cut her off, sharp and sudden. Weight variance detected, 240.7 grams. We both stared at the monitor. The number flickered, 240.6, 248. Full lockdown, Hayes ordered, hitting the alarm. No, I initiated the sequence. Blast doors slammed shut. Containment seals activated. Emergency power engaged. The weight reading climbed, 241.0 grams. Jet out, Hayes said quietly. Run. But protocol. Run. I ran. Behind me, I heard the containment case crack. The last thing I saw was Hayes reaching for the door handle. The emergency bunker was 3 levels below the containment chamber. Standard procedure for major breaches. Get underground, seal the doors, wait for the all clear. I sat with 15 other researchers, watching the security feeds. Dr. Hayes was still alive, for now. Time since initial contact 2 hours, 17 minutes. Paddle reported, logging readings from a laptop. Subject showing standard molecular bonding at primary contact points. The monitors showed Hayes in the sealed containment chamber. SCP-524 had taken the form of a simple glass water cup fused to her right hand. The liquid inside was clear, almost pure water. It always started easy. Someone has to help her. One of the junior researchers said, his voice trembling. Negative. Peterson replied from his station. Protocol is absolute. No secondary exposure permitted. I watched the screens, documented everything, just like Hayes had taught me. Weight reading holding at 241.0 grams. I reported. No variance since initial breach. The cup filled again. Hayes drank. She'd been doing it without hesitation since the beginning. She knew the protocols, knew what happened if you waited. Initial fluid composition appears to be saline. Paddle noted. Minimal cellular content. Subject maintaining consciousness and showing controlled consumption patterns. Hour 3 brought the first change. The liquid turned pink, then red. Fluid transitioning to blood content. I logged. Subject displaying standard adverse reactions. Hayes vomited between drinks, but she kept drinking, kept following protocol. Even now, she was teaching me. Showing me how to die correctly. Someone want to explain how this happened? Peterson asked during hour 4. The containment case was rated for 10 times the observed pressure variance. Running structural analysis. Paddle replied. Preliminary data suggests fractures in the primary seal. Possibility of progressive degradation over time. I thought about the weight variations we'd seen, the tiny changes, the crack that had formed. Had it been planning this? Learning? Adapting? Hour 6 brought the next change. The liquid turned greenish-yellow. Bile content increasing. I noted mechanically. Subject showing signs of accelerated dehydration. Hayes looked at the camera, made a gesture with her free hand. Sign language. Our emergency communication protocol. She's requesting terminal intervention. Peterson translated. Denied, a new voice said. A man in a black suit stood by the door. I hadn't seen him enter. Overseer Marcus, the one in charge. We need the data. Hayes kept drinking, kept deteriorating, kept teaching me what happened when containment failed. Hour 12. The liquid turned black. Unknown fluid composition, Paddle reported. Collecting spectral analysis. Hour 15. Hayes stopped vomiting. No energy left. Hour 18. Her skin began to gray. Organ failure imminent, I reported. Subject showing terminal dehydration symptoms. Hayes made the sign again, requesting termination. Dinnied? The overseer repeated. Continue observation. I watched my mentor die by inches, documented every moment, every drink, every change just like she'd taught me. How her 22 brought something new. Weight variance detected, I announced. 241.7 grams. The room went silent. Confirm reading, Peterson ordered. Confirmed. I said, my voice shaking slightly. Weight increasing gradually. Currently 241.9 grams. Impossible, Patel whispered. The weight never changes during active bonding. The number kept climbing. 242 climbing. 242.5, 243 LO. Hayes looked directly into the camera, made a different sign. Not requesting termination this time. Requesting access to my father's file. Authorization granted, the overseer said suddenly. Show her. Peterson pulled up the file on my screen. Video footage from my father's final day. I hadn't known it existed. The timestamp showed 3 months ago. My father, in the containment chamber, SCP-524 bonded to his hand. But something was wrong. Weight variance detected in historical footage. Patel noted. Same pattern we're seeing now. The video showed my father drinking, deteriorating, dying. But he was writing something between drinks. Notes, calculations, observations. Play the audio, the overseer ordered. My father's voice, weak but clear, filled the bunker. It's not generating the liquid, he said. It's not creating anything. It's a doorway, a connection. Something on the other side is learning about us, learning how we work, learning how to. The video cut off. Current weight reading 244.5 grams. Patel reported, his voice trembling. Breach alarms activated again, all through the facility. Every containment chamber, every sealed object, every contained thing. Multiple containment failures detected. Someone else yelled. Sites across the network reporting similar breaches. Pattern matching temporal signatures from initial. Initiate total site purge. The overseer ordered. Authorization code 00, fate. Another voice confirmed. Confirm purge? The overseer repeated. Sir, there are still people up there, Peterson protested. Confirm purge? The overseer said again, his voice. I looked at the monitor, at Hayes, at what was left of her, at the thing pretending to be a glass cup. The weight reading, 244.5 grams. Hayes finally stopped drinking. The bunker sealed itself. Backup power engaged. 27 researchers locked underground while the facility above us burned. Purge sequence complete, Peterson reported, eventually. Surface facilities sanitized, another voice confirmed. Casualty report, 47 personnel, I said, my voice hollow. 16D class. Dr. Hayes. I stared at my darkened screen, thought about my father's last words, about Hayes' last warning, about the one rule that had kept us safe until we started asking questions. What do we do now? Someone asked. We wait, the overseer replied. We rebuild. We contain. He looked at me. We follow the rule. Never interact directly with SCP-524. Because now I knew why. It wasn't a cup that made you drink. It was a cup that learned how to drink you. 72 hours in the emergency bunker. 3 days watching monitoring stations, checking readings, waiting for word from above. Surface decontamination complete, Patel announced, finally. Structural integrity verified. Safe to begin containment procedures. I stared at the screen showing the burned out containment chamber. Everything was gone. The robotic arms, the monitoring equipment, the sealed case. Everything except SCP-524. It sat in the center of the room, untouched by the purge. A simple ceramic mug, white with blue stripes. Weight reading confirmed at 240.5 grams, Peterson reported. No variance detected. The overseer, who had finally identified himself as Marcus, studied the monitors. Begin recontainment using Protocol 0. Protocol 0. The procedure no one talked about. The one requiring human hands. I'll do it, I said. Everyone turned to me. You don't have clearance, Peterson started. I have level 2 access and direct containment experience, I replied, just like Hayes would have. I've documented more direct exposures than anyone else here. I know the procedures. She's right, Marcus said quietly. And she has relevant experience. I knew what he meant. What my father had seen. What Hayes had died trying to understand. The preparation took an hour. Final messages recorded. Forms signed. A new containment case brought up from deep storage. Remember the rule, Peterson said as I entered the airlock. No matter what happens, no matter what you see, never interact directly with SCP-524. I know, I said, finishing the sentence for him. The containment chamber still smelled of smoke. My boots crunched on burned debris as I approached the object. It looked exactly like my father's favorite mug, the one he'd had on his desk for 20 years. Weight holding steady. Paddle's voice came through my headset. 240.5 grams. I set the new containment case beside it, checked the seals, verified the locks. Everything by protocol. Everything exactly right. Now came the hard part. I took out the remote manipulator arms, smaller, emergency versions of the destroyed system. They were my lifeline. Reaching for the mug, I felt a tremor. The weight changed. 240.7 grams. Pull back, Peterson ordered. Abort procedure. Negative, Marcus countered. Continue containment. I guided the arms closer. The weight kept climbing. 241 do, 241.5. Manual containment required, Marcus stated flatly. Proceed. I knew what that meant. What had to happen? I reached down, not for the mug, but for the self-destruct trigger Hayes had hidden under the floor panels. The one she'd signed to me about while dying. The one my father had installed after learning the truth. Site self-destruct sequence activated, I announced. 5 minutes to complete thermal purge. Please evacuate immediately. What are you doing? Peterson demanded. Following protocol, I replied. The real protocol. The one my father and Hayes died to create. I looked at the mug. It had changed form again. Now it looked like Hayes' coffee cup, the one she'd always kept on her desk. SCP-524 isn't just contained here, I explained. It's contained at multiple sites because it keeps learning, keeps spreading, keeps finding new ways to make us break that one rule. The countdown continued. 4 minutes. Each site it infects, it learns more, studies more, understands more about how we work. I continued, backing toward the door, until it learns enough to do what it's trying to do right now. 3 minutes. A robotic voice announced. Your father found a way to stop it. Marcus said suddenly, not a question. He found the only way, I confirmed. Stop letting it learn. Destroy every instance, every site, every trace. 2 minutes. The weight changes weren't containment breaches, I continued. They were successes. The object getting closer to its goal, learning enough about human biology to start generating its own mass, to start reproducing. 1 minute. Containment protocols will never work, I said, because it learns from them, adapts to them, uses them. The only solution is to destroy everything it's learned. Every site, every record, every trace. And hope we can kill it faster than it can learn to survive. Marcus finished. 30 seconds. I sealed the containment chamber, locked the doors, started the final sequence, just like Hayes had taught me. Just like my father had planned. 10 seconds. The robotic voice announced, almost sounding sympathetic. I looked at the monitor one last time, at the mug sitting innocently in the room. It had changed again. Now it looked like my favorite teacup, the one I still kept on my desk at home. 0. The facility burned. The bunker held shielding us from the inferno. The records, everything we had on SCP-524, were erased, and somewhere in other sites in other containment chambers, Other identical mugs sat waiting, learning, adapting, growing. There was only one rule that mattered anymore. Never interact directly with SCP-524, because once was all it needed. One touch, one person, to learn how to open us, to learn how to consume us all. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was an art history student. Now, I am the keeper of a terrible secret, a witness to a silent war fought in the shadows. A war against a thing that wears the face of the ordinary, that hides in plain sight, that waits for us to slip, to forget, to reach out and touch. We destroyed everything we could, burned it all to ashes. But did we get it all? Did we stop it? Or did we just teach it one more lesson? I don't know. All I know is that somewhere out there, in a forgotten corner of the world, in a dusty antique shop, or on a cluttered desk, it waits. A simple cup, a harmless object, waiting for someone to pick it up and learn. So, I'll tell you what my father told me, what Dr. Hayes died trying to teach me, the one rule that matters, the one rule you must never forget. Never interact directly with SCP-524. Don't touch it, don't look at it, don't even think about it, because if you do, it will learn about you. And that's a lesson you can't afford to let it learn. The end. This was a long but rewarding story to write and adapt. I hope the changes in the 5-part structure meet your expectations. Let me know what you think, and if you have any further requests.